the commentaries explain that Elimelech left Eretz Yisrael because there was a famine in Eretz Yisrael, and he, being a wealthy man and a person of influence and in position to help, was being bogged down. He was getting tired of complaints of the Jews. He was stingy, perhaps. He didn't want to share with them his money. And so he took his family and moved to Moav. Keenly aware, by the way, the commentaries say, keenly aware that if he left Eretz Yisrael, he was in danger, Rahman al-Islam, of having his children intermarry. He specifically went to the land of Moav because he was of the opinion that his sons would not be allowed to marry Moabite women. And so he figured to himself, if I move to Moav, I'll be protected. There's no way my sons will ever marry non-Jewish women, because the Torah says, Lo yova yamoni Moavi b'kal Hashem, which means that a Jew is not allowed to marry a Moabite woman. All right, this is at least very briefly the simple understanding of it. Until we encounter a commentary on Chumash, written by the Baal HaTurim. The Baal HaTurim was also the author of the Tur Shulchan Aruch, printed in almost all Chumashim, the commentary of the Baal HaTurim, who writes in his special cryptic way a very short commentary on a pasuk in Parshas Shmos, which I'll share with you in a moment, which forces us to change and to rethink our entire understanding of the entire story of Rus. After this two-line comment of the Tur, of the Baal HaTurim and Chumash, we're forced to take a step back and rethink everything that's going on in the story of Rus. And I'll tell you what it is. The commentary of the Baal HaTurim is often filled with gematrias, the numerical equivalent of different words in the Torah, and he also very often cross-references and shows you where certain expressions in the Torah are used in other places as well. Toward the beginning of Parshas Shmos, there's a pasuk which describes the origins, the beginning of the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu. And the pasuk says, Vayelech ish mi beis Levi. A man went from the house of Levi, Vayikach es bas Levi, and he married a bas Levi. Who is this ish that the pasuk is referring to? This eventually becomes the father of Moshe Rabbeinu, Amram. Who is the woman that he marries? The mother of Moshe Rabbeinu, Yocheved. Vayelech ish mi bas Levi, vayikach es bas Levi, and the Torah proceeds to tell the entire story of the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu. On the words Vayelech ish in Chumash Shmos, the Baal HaTurim writes that this expression Vayelech ish appears twice in Chumash. Appears twice in Tanakh. Once with regard to Amram, Vayelech ish, Amram went, and the second time in the first pasuk of Rus. The first pasuk of Rus begins, Vayhi b'mei shvoit hashoftim. It was in the days of the judges. Vayirov boretz, there was this famine in the land. Quote, Vayelech ish, and a man went, mi Beis Lechem Yehuda. A man went from Beis Lechem, and he went to live in Moav, and he took his wife and his sons, etc. Says the Baal HaTurim, the words Vayelech ish are used in all of Tanakh only twice. You'll find this expression, Vayelech ish, only two places in the entire Tanakh. Once by Amram, when he marries Yocheved, and they have Moshe Rabbeinu, and the other time when Elimelech leaves Eretz Yisrael, together with his wife Nomi, and his two sons, Machlan and Kilyan. Excuse me. These are the two places in all of Tanakh where you find the expression, Vayelech ish. Adds the Baal HaTurim. Why these two places bedafka? What's the connection between Amram marrying Yocheved and Elimelech leaving Eretz Yisrael together with his wife Nomi? Simple, says the Baal. Well, he doesn't say simple, but the Baal HaTurim explains. I'll tell you what the connection is. When Vayelech ish, when the man goes in Parsha Shmos, when Amram goes to marry Yocheved, what came from that union? Who came from that union? Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu referred to by Chazal as Goyel Rishon, the first redeemer of the Jewish people. When the Torah says later in Rus, Vayelech ish mi Beis Lechem, Elimelech leaves Eretz Yisrael, and he goes to Moav. What comes from that union eventually? Rus gives birth to Oved, who gives birth to Yishai, who gives birth to David, who is the ancestor of Mashiach, who is referred to by Chazal as Goyal Achron, the final Redeemer. In fact, Chazal say, Goyal Rishon, who Goyal Achron? So this pasuk says the Baal HaTurim gave us, this Vayelech Ish gave us the Goyal Rishon, and this Vayelech Ish gave us the Goyal Achron. End of commentary in Baal HaTurim. You can look it up yourself if you want. It's on the first pasuk in Chumash Shmos, Perek Beis, pasuk Aleph. Vayelech Ish mi Beis Levi. This is what the Baal HaTurim explains. And the truth is that when you first read this commentary of the Baal HaTurim, it's incredibly difficult to understand. Rabbeinu Shalom, how in heaven's name do you compare Amram to Elimelech? Amram, the Gemara says, was the tzaddik hador, was the greatest tzaddik of the generation. Amram, the Gemara says, was the gadol hador. So much so that when he got divorced, the entire generation imitated him, and when he got remarried, the entire generation, Amram was a tremendous tzaddik. Elimelech, not so much. At least when you study it the first way, it's not understood that way. Elimelech left the Jewish people in their hour of need. He was in a position to help them, and he turned his back on them. And yet, the Baal HaTurim says, this one gave us the Goyal Rishon, this one gave us the Goyal Achron. The Baal HaTurim seems to equate the two. On a simple level, he's not saying that Elimelech was a tzaddik. On a simple level, he's just saying, from this union, eventually comes the Goyal Achron. But the commentaries explain that there's more to this Baal HaTurim, and that there, in fact, is some kind of connection between the two. To explain this, let's go a little deeper. And here again, there's another very strange medrash in Megillas Rus. The medrash says that Orpah took 40 steps together with Rus and Naomi before she decided to turn around and leave. 40 steps, the medrash says, Orpah took as they went from Moav, from Moav to Eretz Yisrael. She took 40 steps with her sister-in-law and with her sister Rus and her mother-in-law Naomi. 40 steps before Naomi eventually prevailed upon her and told her to go back to Moav, and she acquiesced and she left. 40 steps. No, was is the Große Gedula? 40 steps. Maybe some of you have iPhones that you carry around in your pocket, or smartphones or something like that counts your steps. Any of you have something that counts your steps? Because you're supposed to take at least 10,000 steps a day. I try to take 10,000 steps a day. So Orpah, if she would have had a phone or an app that would have counted her steps, it would have counted 40 steps. Says the Medrash, Orpah was rewarded for the 40 steps that she took. Orpah was rewarded for the 40 steps that she took. What was her reward? Listen to this, says the Medrash. Medrash Rabbah in Rus. What was her reward? Well, it turns out Orpah had a son, a very famous son, who was actually, according to some opinion, according to the commentaries in the Medrash, was born approximately 9 months after this story. After Orpah turns around and goes back to Moav, turning her back on Rus and Naomi, 9 months later she has a son, a very famous son. And his name was Goliath. Goliath, of course, is the one eventually who faces David HaMelech, and David HaMelech kills him. In the Schus, says the Medrash, of Orpah walking 40 steps with Rus and Naomi, Goliath taunted the Jews for 40 days. She merited that Goliath taunted the Jews for 40 days. End of Medrash. And again, it's an incredibly cryptic and difficult to understand Medrash. First of all, what's the connection? And second of all, what kind of zechus is this? Because she took 40 steps, therefore this is considered a zechus, that she merited that her son Goliath taunted the Jews for 40 days and blasphemed the name of Hashem and stood there and challenged the Jews? Ma kesher, what's the connection between the two? And so the commentaries explain it like this. David HaMelech those who've studied about his life, David will remember, David HaMelech actually was the son-in-law of Shaul HaMelech. David HaMelech was the son-in-law. He married the daughter of Shaul HaMelech. How did he merit to marry the daughter of Shaul HaMelech? Now, I should add at this point that as with many relationships between in-laws, there was no love lost, pardon the expression, between Shaul and David. At the beginning, they got along very well. But toward the end, there was no love lost between the two. Ashvera Parsha. So how did David HaMelech, even end up marrying the daughter of Shaul HaMelech? How did he end up with his daughter? How did he end up becoming an heir to the throne through being Shaul's son-in-law? Those who've studied the story will remember exactly what happened. What happened? The Jews in the days of Shaul, under the rulership, under the reign of Shaul HaMelech, were waging war with the Plishtim. And one day a Pelishti challenged the Jews. His name was Goliath. How did he challenge the Jews? In those days, one of the ways that they settled war, that they settled battle, is they'd have one representative from either side. Each side would give one representative. The two representatives would face each other, and whoever won that particular battle, whichever side's representative won that particular battle, would be considered the victor. It was a system of waging a war where the attempt was to save lives. Instead of the two armies facing each other, you'd have one from each side face each other. Goliath, the Torah tells us, was a huge and powerful man. He was, by all appearances, he was invincible. So the Plishtim put forth this deal, and they said, look, we'll give you one representative, you give us one representative, and the two representatives will face off. And whoever wins will be considered the victor. And the Plishtim chose Goliath. And Goliath stood there, the Torah says, and taunted the Jews for 40 days and said, give me a representative, you people who claim to be the people of God, give me a representative, anybody you want, and I'll battle them myself, me and that individual. And for 40 days, the Jews trembled in their boots. Nobody was ready to face Goliath. Nobody. Even Shaul HaMelech himself, the mighty warrior, wouldn't do it. He was afraid. To serve as an incentive to get somebody in the Jewish nation to represent the Jews and face Goliath, Shaul HaMelech offered his own daughter in marriage. And he issued the following royal proclamation. He said, any Jew who will have the courage and the strength to go and face Goliath in battle or in war can have my daughter's hand in marriage if he's victorious, of course. And young David HaMelech, well, at that time he wasn't David HaMelech, young David, who was at the time a shepherd that nobody had heard of, or very few people had heard of, came forward to Shaul HaMelech and said, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll face Goliath. And the Torah says, Shaul looked at him and said to him, you? David was so small, David was so physically small in stature, that even the armor, the protecting armory that he had to wear didn't fit him. He didn't seem strong enough to even hold the blessed spear. And David HaMelech said, yes, I'll do it, because I have betochen in Hashem, and I'll be successful. And Shaul HaMelech agreed. And David HaMelech went out with that famous slingshot and a couple of stones to face Goliath. And as he came to face Goliath with his slingshot, Goliath calls out to him and says to him, you come to fight me with a bunch of stones? And Goliath said those famous words. He said, am I a dog that you come to face me with a bunch of stones? I'm going to destroy you, said Goliath. And David HaMelech said, you're terribly mistaken. I'm not here with stones. I'm here with the Shem Hashem. And with that, with one stone, in one shot, with one sling of his slingshot, David HaMelech kills Goliath, strikes him right in the head. Goliath falls down. David HaMelech takes Goliath's own spear and beheads that bloodthirsty anti-Semite, that vicious, cruel beast of a human being. And with that, the Jews were victorious at war. And that's how David HaMelech became actually the son-in-law of Shaul HaMelech. That was how he merited to have the hand of Shaul HaMelech's daughter in marriage, because he faced and he won Goliath that day. Now, here's the catch. Here's the catch. Think about what's going on here. You got two sisters. You got Rus and you got Orpah. The Torah says, "Vatishak Orpah lachamoisa, v'Rus dovka bo." Orpah kissed her mother-in-law Naomi on that road from Moav to Eretz Yisrael and left. V'Rus dovka bo, Rus stuck to her. And a voice came out of heaven that day and says, your descendants, you two sisters, Orpah and Rus, your two descendants will one day face each other. And Bnei Hanashuka, the descendants of the one who kissed, Orpah's descendants, will fall in the hands of Bnei Hadvuka, will fall in the hands of Rus, who stuck to Naomi. Actually, when you read the story, you just think, David and Goliath, big deal. Actually, when you understand the story, David and Goliath were cousins. All right, second cousins, third cousins, alumnus. But they were cousins. And David was the one who killed him, and thereby made himself, through this, earned the hand of the daughter of Shaul HaMelech in marriage. And that's how he became the son-in-law of King of Shaul HaMelech. In fact, you may have heard of a character called Uriah HaChiti. Uriah HaChiti later marries Bathsheba, and there's a whole story with him. Uriah HaChiti actually was the arms bearer of Goliath. Uriah HaChiti was the one who carried Goliath's arms. And it was when Goliath collapsed after being struck by a stone by David that Uriah HaChiti helps David HaMelech remove Goliath's sword and behead him and kill him. So it turns out that even as Rus and Orpah and Naomi are walking down the road, there's a divine mission, there's a divine plan that's at play here, that's controlling the whole thing, and that's determining the future outcome of this. The seeds of David HaMelech becoming king, David HaMelech's birth and eventually becoming king of a Klal Yisrael, were already being planted. Who was Rus? Who was Rus herself? She was the daughter or the granddaughter of Eglon Melech Moav. In Sifrei Kabbalah, in the Kabbalah Sforim, it says that she was a Gilgul, she was a reincarnation of the daughter of Lot. She was a reincarnation of the daughter of Lot. If you remember, the daughter of Lot had a child with her own father, with Lot himself. They got him drunk, he impregnated his own daughters, and when she had a son from her own father, she named him Moav. The word Moav actually means Me'av, from my father. According to Kabbalah, she, Rus, is a Gilgul HaNeshama, is a reincarnation of this daughter of Lot who got the whole thing started and had the original Moav and had the original son Moav from which all of this comes. David HaMelech, almost his entire life, was challenged, and before, but almost his entire life, his legitimacy was challenged in terms of him being kosher to be a Melech Yisrael. What was the problem? The problem is that there's a pasuk that says, Lo yovoi Ammoni u'Moavi b'kal Hashem. Members of the nation of Ammon and Moav may not enter into the house of Hashem. David HaMelech's father was Yishai. Yishai's father was Ovid. Ovid's mother was Rus. So David HaMelech was actually a descendant from the nation of Moav. And David HaMelech's legitimacy as king was challenged because of this throughout his entire Malucha. In fact, even as he's going out to wrestle, to fight Goliath. The Torah says that Doeg Ho'adoimi looked at Shaul and asked him, who's this young man that's going out to fight? And they tell him it's David. And the commentaries explain, well, he didn't know who it was. Of course he knew who it was. He was already then sowing the seeds and telling Shaul HaMelech, this young man is not, his legitimacy is, he's an illegitimate Jew. Well, his status as a Jew wasn't being challenged. But his status as a kosher Jew, and definitely his legitimacy to be king, was challenged because of Lo Yovai Amoini Moyovi B'Kal Hashem. In the end, the halacha was paskened. That it's only male members of Ammon and Moav that cannot join the Jewish people, but female members of Ammon and Moav are allowed to join the Jewish people. So David HaMelech's legitimacy was established. But make no mistake, like many arguments in the Jewish people, this battle, this debate raged for many, many hundreds of years. As it turns out, the story is layered and complicated. The story of the birth of the grandfather of David HaMelech is layered on many, many levels. Even the father of Machla, even the grandfather of Rus and Naomi, the Moabite king Eglon, even he was also destined upon, even he also had a zechus that from him should eventually come a Jewish king, because the Torah says that he had at one stage received a message from Hashem, or at least he was led to believe that he was going to receive a message from Hashem. And just because he was going to receive a message from Hashem, he stood up to hear this message from Hashem. And at that point, a voice comes out of heaven and says, because in the schus of the fact that you rose, you will have descendants who will be king over the Jews. In the end, my point is this. With everything that goes on here, Hashem's hand was at play here to see to it that David HaMelech would be born, who would eventually build the Beis HaMikdash, who would eventually lead the Jews into many fantastic victories, who would write the Tehillim, and even eventually be the great-great-grandfather of Mashiach himself, who will please God rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. All the pieces at play, all the parts, Rus and Orpah and Goliath and David HaMelech, all these little tiny pieces come together. They're trying to give us a picture of where eventually David HaMelech will be born from this, and he will be the true ancestor of the Goyal Achar. But the truth is, my dear friends, sorry, one second.